Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop here at Flat 6 Motorsports. My name is Ivan, and today we're going to show you how to install the 992 Sound Symposer Delete Kit. Let's get into it. So before we get started, I want to show you real quick what's included in the kit. So we have right in front of you, we have a couple of different block off caps here. We have two shallow caps, and those are used to block off the actual ports in the kind of like the firewall engine bay area. And the other two taller plugs, those are going to be used to actually plug in the hoses on the intercooler neck. We also include a little rubber cap to block off the vacuum hose that you're going to be left open. And then of course a zip tie to secure that to the hose. So let's go ahead and pull this 992 apart. We'll show you how it goes together. So before we get started, just want to go over a couple tools that you're going to need for this procedure. We have a pick tool that we're going to need to use to get the hoses off. We also have you can use a pair of pliers, but I do recommend using these hose clamp pliers to get the hose clamps off the intercooler. I have a pair of dikes or cutters so you can cut the zip ties. And then I have a selection of just 3/8 and 1/4 inch ratchets to use with the T45 bit and the T30 bits. Those are going to be used to actually removing the wing, which we'll get into next. I also recommend using some painter's tape so we can cover up some areas to keep from scratching, and just a little bit of silicone lubricant to help with those hoses and for installation. So first, now we have a cold car, we're going to go ahead on this vehicle, we're going to go ahead and need to remove the coolant cap and also the oil cap. And we're just going to set those aside for now. Once those are out of the way, this cover simply just pops up and comes right out. And just to keep these ports covered, we're just going to set these back on here for now, but make it look obvious so you don't forget to put those back later. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to be removing the two engine bay fans. Those simply just pull up and then forward. You can just flip them over, pull the red tab out with your thumb, like so, and then you can just push down on that, and that'll allow you to remove the connector. And just repeat with the other one. So now that we have the cover and the fans off the top, we went ahead and raised up the wing because that is going to be the next thing that you have to remove. Now it seems a little intimidating, but if you take your time with it, it's actually pretty simple to use. You're only going to need two tools, a T30 and a T45. So if you have a collection, that's a pretty common sizes. So we're going to go through this kind of step by step, and we're going to take it nice and slow, and that way you're not going to have to worry about anything. I am going to use a little bit of the painter's tape to kind of block off some of the areas on the taillights. I'll show you in the video here. That way when we take off the large light bar, we don't have to worry about scratching anything else. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward, so let's get into it. All right, so the first thing we're going to take off, once we remove the covers and we taped off the lights, we have two T30 on top of this large light bar. We have these two sockets, one on each side, and then we have 4 T30s bolts going from the light bar, kind of going through the bumper, and that's going to be right here in those locations. So let's go ahead and get those. All right, now that we have the 2 outer screws out and the 4 inner screws out, we're now able to pull the light bar back enough to get to the connectors, one on each side. They're a little finicky, so I definitely recommend having somebody else help you if you're not comfortable with it. But we're gonna go ahead and kind of gently slide the light bar out. And as you can see right here is the green connectors. For the light bar, there's one on each side. Now, the trick is the latches are underneath. So the pick that I showed earlier helps by reaching underneath and releasing the little red safety tab, and that way you can undo them. So like I said, if you have somebody else hold one side of the light while you get the other side, because that way it doesn't fall out and scratch something. All right, next up we have a couple more T30 screws. We have 2 on each of the taillights. You have 2 on each of the taillights. You have 1 forward-facing screw right here, and then you have another one right inside the housing here. And once those are out, you'll be able to pull the taillights out and kind of over and disconnect the connector that's right back here. All right, once those screws are out, you're gonna wanna slide the taillight back just a little bit, kind of this far, and then it's gonna pivot outward, like so. It might make some noise until it releases. And then same thing on the light. There's a electrical connector with little red safety latch that has to be pulled out first before you can press it down, and then that comes right out. So before we go any further, I want to show for reassembly, I'm going to show how to put a piece of tape along this edge right here for when you reinstall the taillights. They're a little finicky and a little weird kind of coming in. It's a very close tolerance, and to keep from damaging the paint from the taillights coming in, we're going to put a strip of painter's tape there so that it keeps it protected from when you're going back in. So doesn't have to go very far. It just has to basically kind of cover this lip right here, any of the painted surfaces right here. You should be able to see it between, clean and dirty, kind of where the PPF would go. So we're just gonna go right along this edge here because the taillight has to slide in pretty close and then kind of pivot inwards, and we don't want it to catch the edge here and catch the paint. So I'll just put a little strip like that. As you see, it just covers the top section of that little shelf basically where the taillight's gonna sit. So we'll just go ahead and just do that right now while we remember it, so that when we put the taillight back in, it's gonna be protected. After the taillights are out, we have 2 T30s left on this rear bumper. This is the final piece from the body that are holding onto this spoiler, and then we're gonna get to the big boys on the spoiler itself. All right, now those are all done. The only thing left that's holding the spoiler in are 4 T45 screws. You have 2 on this side and of course 2 on the other side. So go ahead and pull out your T45 3/8 ratchet, loosen it up, a little bit snug, but they should crack loose pretty easily. All right, now that all the bolts are out holding the spoiler in, the last thing we need to do is disconnect the large electrical connector up there that's connecting to the lights, the motors, and everything like that. It's a big connector in the engine bay. We'll disconnect that rather easily. But 2 things I want to kind of point out as we go to remove the spoiler. The piece of the body, the rear bumper cover, actually hooks over the backside right here and kind of hooks onto that. So what you want to do is just kind of like loosen that up a little bit on both sides, and that'll kind of get it out of the way. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually kind of pivot the wing, tilt it back, and then kind of lift up and go towards the front of the car, and that'll help clear these little tabs in the back here. It's a little tricky. There's some locating dowels on the wing itself that you have to kind of lift up and clear before you can get it out. But once you see how it goes, you'll be able to figure that out. So let's get that out. All right, so here's the big connector over on this side. And there's just a press little thumb button. And you just pull it apart. Might be a little stiff. It's okay if it comes off the little clip. You can just clip it back on. No big deal. And we'll get back to that. All right, so like I was saying, what we need to do is just kind of lever this back. As you can see, it can move just fine. There's 2 dowels that kind of go down to locate the wing on the body. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of rock it back a little bit to clear those dowels. It's a little finicky. And we'll kind of push it forward just a little bit. Like so. That way we clear the body panels. And as we tilt it back, kind of push it forward a little bit and kind of rock it out like that. And there we go. All right, now that we have the wing out of the way, you have great access to the sound Symposers. As you can see here, we have the one on the left and the one on the right. So the first thing that we're gonna have to go do is we're gonna simply disconnect the hoses here from the engine bay firewall. We're just gonna basically squeeze and pull down. Next, we have a 10mm screw that's holding in the boxes, one on each side. So we're gonna use our 10mm socket and take these off. We're gonna use our band clamp pliers here, and we're only gonna be compressing and moving the outer clamp, the one that's closest to the boxes. And basically all we're gonna be doing is on the left side, we're just gonna be moving it in so that we can pop the box off the hoses that are connected to the intercooler. And on the other side, we're actually just gonna keep them compressed because there's not really a lot of space for them to move. So we're just gonna keep them compressed while we wiggle the box out. Lastly, on the right side, there is a small vacuum line over here, has a similar connection to this. Basically, you just squeeze it on both sides and remove it, and then I'll show you what we're gonna do with that line after we get these boxes out of the way. So let's get into it. Now, just to interject here, if you find this is going to be a little snug on the intercooler pipe here, this is where the silicone spray comes in handy. Just do a little squirt on the top of it there. And then you can use your hook tool to kind of work around the hose gently, carefully. And what that'll do is kind of like break the surface tension there, kind of work it out. They are in there quite snug, so I'm gonna try removing it off the intercooler first. That way I'm not twisting the hose too much trying to remove it. There we go, that works a little bit better. All right, now you can kind of see a little bit better of how the system works. So you got the box right here, and then basically we need to separate it off of this side. The hose is gonna remain connected to the intercooler, but we're gonna need to remove the box. Let me just get this out of the way. All right, we can basically just do the same thing on the other side. Now, as I said earlier, there is a little small vacuum line right here off the side. And we're gonna go ahead and disconnect that from the valve. And that's gonna stay there. And we'll go ahead and remove the assembly out of the vehicle. Now we are gonna be, again, putting the hose back onto the intercooler, and then we have a plug included with the kit, a cap. And we're gonna be capping off this vacuum line here and securing with the zip tie. So that way you're not gonna have a vacuum leak later on. So, all right, now that the sound Symposer is removed from the other side, we're gonna put that hose right back on, just like it was. Put our band clamp right back on. And while we're at it, we'll go ahead and move the other one. There we go. So the shorter of the two caps that we supply with the kit, there's the two shorter ones, those are gonna plug into the firewall connections, just like so. Just press them in. Next, the taller caps, those are gonna go on the end of the hoses that we just reinstalled back in the vehicle. Now they are gonna be a snug fit, so if you need to use a little more silicone spray, go for it. If you want to do this outside the car and then install the hoses, be my guest. So once the plugs are in place, go ahead and move the band clamp back over and re-secure. Now the other side, you'll have to keep it, the band clamp kind of loose, like so. Like I said, we've got our tall one. Slide it in place and secure. Lastly, we're going to take our vacuum line. We have a little rubber cap, and we're going to go ahead and just press that down over the end of this. Now, normally it should stay by itself, but we want to be sure. So we're just going to go ahead and use the zip tie, kind of throw it in that little bracket, just like so. Get her nice and snug. And the wire cutters I mentioned earlier, that's what this is for. Kind of cut that extra bit off. And there you have it. A pretty straightforward installation, and you also got to learn how to take your wing out as well. So if you want a Symposer delete kit for yourself, check us out on flat6.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.